Today on Voice of the Valleys, ding dong, the witch is dead, or rather deposed, as Angela Rayner announces she has resigned as Deputy First Minister and Housing Minister. We'll go over why, we'll go over what was said, we'll go over all of the developments with regards to that. Interesting, very interesting developments as well with regards to the Epstein saga, that maybe people who were suspicious of the government were indeed right to be so. And finally, not too sure whether the replacements that may be coming into the British government in 2029 are really going to be any better. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friendly neighbourhood, far-right thug, always satirical, unless he's not, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. It is Friday afternoon, currently. Friday the 5th of September. So I'm hoping this is going to be coming out tonight or tomorrow. Got some interesting developments coming up in the next couple of weeks, ladies and gentlemen. Some more interviews coming up, which is going to be very, very good. Talk about all things to do mainly with Wales and the health services and stuff like that. So, just going to grab, I might go out of focus 2 seconds here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh no. There we are. And document, which I've laminated, has fallen forward. Anyway, getting straight into today. So before we get into, we'll put out some posts about this, which I'm hoping people will pass on and share. Before we get into the major breaking news that's happened recently with regards to Angela Rayner's sudden resignation as Deputy First Minister and Housing Minister, when we know they were grooming her to be the next Prime Minister after Keir Starmer. We know they were grooming her to do that. I made some posts recently on YouTube, on X, on the social medias, because I wanted to get one of the clips which I just posted a little while ago out as far as I can. It's the clip and the clip, sorry, to do with Angela Rayner, you know, the whole blatant corruption thing, but also Kat Eccles and her remarks about her constituents. She represents Stourbridge, by the way, and I wanted to give some stuff to substantiate and give why I want this clip, if possible, to gain so much attention, because I think it's important that people understand how their elected representatives think of them. And I've got some data to show you as well, ladies and gentlemen. So Kat Eccles was the Labour MP for Stourbridge, who we talked about a little while ago, who, upon somebody commenting on one of her ex posts saying, "You cover for degenerates coming in from the third world," she clapped back saying, "The biggest threat to women are native degenerate men," basically. That's the thing that she clapped back with. Now, in her constituency, it does seem that she might not have too much to worry about, however, but it does not bode well with the sentiment that's building, and with what we've seen happening. There's also some things to go over with the girls in Scotland, by the way. You see a lot of people furiously deleting tweets as well, as Dumana and his girlfriend, wife, whoever it was that was with him, has since been charged with assault, which, again, corroborates the mother's allegations to what happened before. But I think it's important to understand how your elected representatives think of you, especially if you're just a native Welsh or native British person, okay? Stourbridge is a constituency, right, of about, based on the 2021 census, of about 57,000 people, okay? Quite large by the seam of it. Quite a heavy population density, right? And it's pretty much an even split between men and women, right? Pretty much an even split between men and women. Most of the population, as you would imagine, falling between 18 and 64. However, when she makes the comment, ladies and gentlemen, about the native degenerates that she's referring to, when you look at some of the data with regards to the ethnic makeup of her constituency, you do see some quite troubling and quite, convenient things, if you will. Makes you wonder, if the demographics were vastly different, would she then be saying the same? If she was talking about a constituency like, well, even then, Rotherham, the child sexual abusers were about 3%. The ones who made up about 2/3 of the data from Operation Stovewood only made up about 3 to 4% of the population. But when she's saying here that the biggest threat to women are degenerate native men, she's talking, in this instance, about nearly half of her constituency, about 43% if the numbers based on this data are accurate, right? Because as of the country of birth in the 2021 census, the majority of residents in Stourbridge were born in the UK, 52,000. So the only ones that were born in other countries. If I've looked 52,000 and it was 56,000 overall, you know, you're not looking at very much whatsoever. About 7%, 7.5% were born outside of the UK. The majority then either coming from Africa or Europe. So Africa coming from comes in about 2,000 people, 2,300 people, and then the EU coming in at about 1,200 people. Okay, you've got other areas of Europe, you've got Middle East and Asia, other countries. But overall, 92.6% of people in her constituency born in the UK. And then the vast majority also, 86.1%, being native white British, right? So you then have the next population demographic after that is Asian. The thing is, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't even give you initially making up about 10%. When you look at the pie chart, which I'll flash up on screen for you in a moment, when you look at the pie charts, it doesn't even show you the percentages initially that the others make up because the fractions are so small. So this is what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. If I bring this up for you, let me zoom in just a little bit. These are the graphs which I am referring to on the right-hand side here. So this is the map of Stourbridge, and this is the ethnicity graphs and the, the other graphs that we need to talk about today, country of birth, etc., and religion. So yeah, the UK, as I said, country of birth, UK, 92.6%. And then you have ethnicity group, the vast majority being just native white people. So obviously those are the people that she's talking about. But then when you do the math on this, again, it comes out that she's saying here, casting and throwing shade on nearly half of her constituency. Because again, just over half, literally 50.2%, so it's pretty much even split, right? So again, well, actually, no, males are slightly less. Males are 49.8%, but it's pretty much 50-50, okay? You can round to 50-50. It's only a matter of about 200 people, all in all. She's then talking shade and saying that the biggest threat to the community, the biggest threat to her, people like her, women, would be the vast majority of her constituents. Not that when you notice troubling trends such as ethno-religiously motivated rape gangs and ethnic cleansing in other constituencies up and down the country. No, of course, that's not dangerous. The biggest danger is obviously just regular working people in her community paying her taxes, right? You know, paying taxes to her to do stuff with, right? Paying taxes to her councils that she runs to do stuff with, right? And this is what she thinks of you. And I just urge you, ladies and gentlemen, again, if you've got the link to that clip, which you'll be finding in the post and you'll find it on my X page as well, send it. If you have any friends, relatives, if you live in Stourbridge whatsoever, make that video nice and famous so you can fully understand, again, so you guys fully understand and everyone in that community understands what their elected representative thinks of them. Because they should remember it next time at the ballot box and they should be made to feel it. Right, they should be made to feel it. When the pleas come and the crocodile tears come, right, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, please vote for us, should remember exactly what they think of you. Remember exactly what they think of you. If you're just a regular person that wants to show a bit of pride in where he comes from and stand for the people of this nation, stand for the sovereignty of this nation, even. So I've seen a couple of debates on whether Britain is a sovereign nation. I know in name it is, right? In name it is, but in practice, is it really? No, of course not, because our government is deciding to be beholden to foreign interests, if you will. And other people like this, when you hear people like Kat, when you hear people like Ellie Goulding, for example, talking about the migrant hotel protesters, making her embarrassed to be British, right? Make sure you know exactly where these people are residing and make sure you know exactly where these people are coming from. Obviously, I would imagine, please, if you happen to live there, if you happen to know anything about the area, please do inform me on the relative safety of Stourbridge. Obviously, I'm not from there, so I can't comment on that. But Ellie Goulding, you will need to pull up the demographic data of Ellie Goulding's residence to see the kind of environment that she is living in, which I will pull up on full screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody kindly posted this on X with a very funny caption being, "Hey, Jamie, pull up where Ellie Goulding lives. Pull up the demographic data of where Ellie Goulding lives." And as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, you would imagine it's a very safe community, very affluent, prosperous community with a 96% white British, seemingly white British, right? So again, these people really talking down from their ivory towers, on the undesirables, the lower classes that they despise, but yet rely on their votes for their position, right? And they do their best to try and make it seem, no, we care about you, we love you, we love you because we hope that you'll vote for us. And if you do, you'll end up getting scorn. If you don't, you'll end up getting scorn. And yeah, just again, to whenever you see one of these big celebrities that also have very questionable interest in and of themselves, that come out and say they're ashamed to be British, or that the biggest threat to women, right, the biggest threat to the native women of these isles are, of course, the native men, which is one of the, biggest lies at the moment that we've been told. And you'll need to do this experiment to, take somebody down. And admittedly, again, I've said this time and time again, with the culture that we've allowed to pervade our communities and stuff like that, we do have a big degeneracy problem. We do have a big degeneracy problem, which we need to sort out. Absolutely. But when you're seeing these hyper-privileged, right, very wealthy, right, protected and influential celebrities or socialist politicians, whatever it is, where they're going to be protected no matter what. It's you that has to front the bill for everything that they want to bring in, right? It's you that, as Oxfordshire Council wanted to do, which I bring this to the front. I was going to talk about this later on at the end. It's you that Oxford Council, for example, want to house these people in your homes. So this is a pamphlet, which I'll bring up on screen for you now, from Oxford Council. They're saying, again, it's not going to be the politicians and the celebrities and whoever that has to deal with it. It's going to be you, just a regular person who's barely making ends meet as it is, right? This is a pamphlet that was shared on X. Refugees are looking for homes in Wantage and Farringdon. If you have a vacant room or property available now, or one that might become available in the future, we can help you find the ideal tenant. And cover their moving costs. So this is the thing. This is where the government are outright just aiding in our replacement. Because they're happy to let our people go homeless on the streets with staph infections. I showed you that video 1 or 2 episodes ago of the guy with a staph infection that was stuck homeless on the street. Meanwhile, they'll give the invaders, the foreign invaders coming over, the 4-star hotels, 3 meals a day, buffet food, which they waste and have fights with anyway, right? Because they don't respect it, because it's all been given to them. They come from a culture that doesn't respect this kind of stuff and doesn't respect civilization a lot of the time. They don't respect it. Never had to work for it. They've just been given it in the hope, with our politicians at least, that they will vote the correct way. Because that's what the end game is. That they want to give these people the vote because they'll vote in a way that's in opposition to you and your best interests. And as a result, then your vote will mean nothing. They'll use democracy to destroy democracy via mass immigration. And I'd say that with no hatred towards anybody in particular. That's just the reality of the situation. Unfortunately. I wish it was different. But ultimately, we do have to wonder now, ladies and gentlemen, is the Politburo collapsing under the weight of its own corruption and degeneracy? So obviously, Angela Rayner announced that she was resigning recently in the midst of a scandal involving stamp duty on her, I believe it was her second home. And here we are. So we have Sky News reporter Beth Rigby, I believe it is, reporting from Downing Street. Here was the presser that went out on Sky News earlier on today. Video coming on screen now.
Well, Sky News understands that Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is to leave government. As we understand it, Angela Rayner has resigned from government as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister. That's all the information I have at the moment, but this comes after a torrid few days for the Deputy Prime Minister around property tax and whether she underpaid stamp duty. The Prime Minister has given her support and time to explain herself, but as I understand it, Angela Rayner has had to step down from government.
So there we go, and she has indeed stepped down. So let's count it up a minute, ladies and gentlemen. We have what? Homeless Minister resigned for making her tenants homeless in order to gain more money. I have a Corruption Minister, who I believe resigned for corruption. And now we have a housing minister resigning on accounts of, fees to do with her second house and stamp duty. So this is truly, truly nuts. This is truly, truly nuts. And that's why I say, because we have so many things. We have a homelessness minister having to resign because of corruption in order to gain more money out of her tenants and making them homeless in the process. So we have a homelessness minister that had to resign for contributing to homelessness. We have an anti-corruption minister resigning for contributing to corruption. So this is where I'm just thinking now, surely this is the beginning of the end, right? Something is coming. I'm scared of where this is going to go. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm not claiming to have all the answers and be a prophet or anything like that. But is this... I saw some people saying that this was the first domino. Is this indeed the first domino in a long line of things to come with regards to the collapse of the Labour Conservative, uniparty Politburo? So again, I'll read you a little bit of Angela Rayner's statement now, however, because she did confirm that she was resigning from government. She says, "Thank you for the personal and public support you have shown me in recent days." This is addressed to Mr. Starmer. "As you know, on Wednesday, I referred myself to your independent advisor on ministerial standards, Sir Laurie Magnus, to conduct a thorough investigation into my personal financial circumstances after I become aware that it is likely I inadvertently paid the incorrect rate for stamp duty land tax." Before I carry on, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring something up for you, which is very, very troubling indeed, where you can use this as a reference anytime now somebody tries to say that, we live in a free country or anything like that, right? Because tax comes up a lot in our country nowadays and in our government and in everything, in conversations around politics, right? I want to give you a full rundown. I realize there's so many things that have happened. I'm not even going to have a chance to get to the Graham Linehan stuff, or Graham Linehan stuff. So Graham Linehan, didn't know, turned up to court yesterday, and he doubled down and turned up in the trans, or he put on somebody's sandwich board with the anti-trans stuff on it. Saying no child is born in the wrong body, that kind of anti-trans stuff. Okay, not like saying we should kill trans people or anything like that. Right. But if we have a look at this, ladies and gentlemen, use this as your reference next time somebody says that we live in a free country or prosperous country. This is a direct and indirect tax list for what we have in the UK. We have income tax, capital gains tax, national insurance tax, inheritance tax, value-added tax, insurance premium tax, excise duties tax, stamp duty tax, income tax again, dividend tax, capital gains tax again, council tax, vehicle tax, corporation tax, business rate tax, fuel duty tax, alcohol duty tax, tobacco duty tax, environmental levies tax, emissions trading scheme tax, energy profits levy tax, apprenticeship levy tax, air passenger duty tax, bank surcharge tax, climate change levy tax, digital service tax, electricity generator levy tax, bank levy tax, petroleum revenue tax, and the list goes on. And the list goes on. If you wonder why people, again, are so poor, people, again, are not prospering, it's because they're being kneecapped in so many ways by things like, climate change levy tax? Climate change levy tax, digital services tax, electricity generator levy tax, all of these things. You wouldn't even know what the hell they mean, but yet you're having to foot the bill for them, whatever they are. So again, the corruption is absolutely endless. The corruption is absolutely endless. So you can't feel sorry for these people. Whether it was she actually did try to do something, she sought advice and she did try to pay it and they got it wrong or whatever. Whether she was just, again, giving the benefit of the doubt is really something which we can't really do anymore with how much we've seen Jess Phillips, for example, kind of saying that she knew about the grooming gangs all along and stuff like that and did nothing, deliberately did nothing, right? I'll see if I can find the clip of that now because that would be a good thing to highlight as well. I think I forgot to bookmark it. But Jess Phillips came up recently and said that, she basically knew everything that was going on and didn't do anything about it deliberately, knew the extent of the abuse and didn't do anything, which we've known about for ages anyway. Can't really give the benefit of the doubt anymore. I deeply regret my decision not to seek additional specialist tax advice given both my permission as Housing Secretary and my complex family arrangements. I take full responsibility for this error. I'd like to take this opportunity to repeat that it was never my intention to do anything other than pay the right amount. Yes, of course it was. Of course it was. Anyway, you can find the statement down below, ladies and gentlemen, in the links. She signs it off with, "Thank you for your leadership and your friendship. I will continue to serve you, our country, and the party and the movement I love in the weeks, months, and years ahead." Be interesting to see if, I don't know, maybe she defects to Corbyn's party or something like that. Who knows? Who knows? But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, the corruption is absolutely endless. Whether it's Angela Rayner, whether it's whatever her name, something Ali, the ex-homelessness minister, whether it's the anti-corruption minister, it's corruption so much everywhere. And the Welsh government is no different. The Welsh government is no different because the Senedd, I don't know if you knew this, ladies and gentlemen, the Senedd has been funding free legal advice for, I believe, this is most likely illegal immigrants or immigrants in general at the taxpayer expense through their sanctuary service. Here's Mark Drakeford to give you the details on that.
We awarded funding to the Refugee Council, the Welsh Refugee Council, to deliver our Wales-wide sanctuary service that is funded now until the end of March 2025, at least. And that does provide free immigration legal advice and advice casework teams across Wales.
So there we are. Meanwhile, in Wales, many areas of Wales are hit more than others, obviously. You potentially have 30% of children, living in poverty. You've got both parents working and they still can't barely make ends meet, right? People are quite literally, in many areas like mine, have to choose between heating and eating, right? Despite both parents working. Now, granted, there's some things with our attitudes and the things that we have and our priorities and stuff like that as people, as individuals, we need to have a look at, right? The way that we've been living our lives and stuff like that, right? Granted. But this is outright showing, again, the government is not working for you. If you're just a regular Welsh person, the government, doesn't matter who it is, whether it's your MP, your MS, it's not working for you. They're catering to the voting bloc which they want to bring in. And they're already doing that at the expense of you, because all of these charities, whether it's the Welsh Refugee Council or or whatever other charity, quote unquote, or non-governmental organization you want to throw out there, they're all funded by you because they're all funded by the government, and you fund the government, obviously, with your taxes and with everything that you have to pay in. And if you obviously don't pay them in, you end up going to prison for a long time. So again, no legal aid for people who've worked all their lives, and, where's the legal aid for, again, this is more so to England at the moment, from what I understand, but where's the legal aid from people fighting, free speech battles and stuff like that at the moment, but they'll give free legal aid to, asylum seekers or foreigners who've been convicted of drug offenses and stuff like that. More often than not, people that are coming in get to claim our legal aid to use against us, right? That's the kind of government that you have. And then people wonder why, with how much power that we've given the government, right? With how much power that we've given them, what authority we've given them, you wonder why things are in the state that they are. And granted, there's a case of individual accountability, but that comes from us and say our decisions that we make on a daily basis, and obviously decisions that we make at the ballot box. But then understanding, oh no, there are actually our enemies that are waging war against us. And we need to be like, oh, right, okay, well, I need to be a little bit more awake to this, and I need to understand that, hang on, not everything actually is my fault. Not everything actually is my fault, and I should maybe start working on those things to try and change them. Because ultimately, if we go along with the silent compliance route, and that's the thing that I get for talking about these things a lot, people that don't understand the ramifications of it, it's like, yeah, but they want you to be silent and compliant. That's exactly what they want. If you're silent and you're not voicing any opposition to it, you're not generating any public awareness, and ultimately the only thing that's going to generate any change, the only thing that they fear is public awareness, right? Because the only thing that we have on our side is our numbers. We don't have any monopoly on force, right? Because we don't have any arms or anything like that, or ability to band together with arms, right? We don't have any ability to band together in like our own militias and stuff like that and exert our force, right? Because everything ultimately comes down to force. Rights are force. And that's why the government, in having a monopoly on force, has a monopoly on your rights, and they can just decide what to take away and give at any point, right? So with that, we don't have any, real capacity to band together in our own groups and in our own militias and in a way our de facto own governments, right? So we've given the authority to that. We've given the authority to the state. And then you wonder, again, why things start happening, things start going downhill. But if you don't end up voicing any opposition to that, if you don't end up generating any public awareness to that, well, ultimately nothing's going to change. And that can start with just one person being willing to stand up and say something. Right? I've had endless arguments with people about this because there is a lot of risk. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of risk. You lose friends, you lose people in your social circle, you potentially lose employment. There's a lot of risk. That's why some people that really can't lose their employment right now, they reach out to me and they tell me things and I can relay them forward. At this point of the moment, I don't really have a lot to lose. Mentioned before on one of the podcasts, the job let me go. So, and I know that it's going to, everything that I've said, and trying to generate public awareness, trying to make people aware, for the good of the country and for the good of the future, right? It's costing me, right now I don't really have a lot else that I can do, which is why I appreciate you guys' support so much. Thank you very much. But anyway, this is the thing. You have to understand that, yes, we have to look ourselves in the mirror, but we also have to understand that our government is against us. You paying tax to fuel your own downfall. And if you want things to be better, there's going to come a time where the rubber meets the road. And ultimately, we're going to have a decision to make. You're in the fight against this, whether you believe in it or not, and whether you want to be in it or not. You're in it either way. Unfortunately, that's just the way things are. That being said, let us serenade, well, not going to be me serenading, but allow Angela to give us one last hurrah on her way out the door. She's given us a song, ladies and gentlemen. She's given us a song, and we're going to play a little bit of that song now for your amusement and entertainment. This has possibly been the best thing to come out of Angela Rayner's tenure. Take it away, Ange.
Angela Rayner pondering how many homes, Bought me one house, bought me two, flip another flat, tax man, no clue. 80k saved with a bright and tan, dodging more duty than the average man. How many homes can Rayner buy? Laughing at you while all the tax they slide. How many homes, I'll name them all, big and dancing in the Commons Hall. Councillor girl roots, but I climb that chain, from Ashton Street to the seaside lane. Stamp duty short, 40 grand unpaid. Oops, bad advice, that's how it's played. Star my blushing, I'm still fine. You pay full tax, I skip the line. Court orders hush, I don't explain. Still stacking home, still playing the game. I pay less tax, but I laugh all day. Rayner style, that's the label way. How many homes can Rayner buy? Laughing at you with the tax they slide. How many homes, I'll name them all, big and dancing in the Commons.
That'll do. That's enough of the nonsense. So go on. Go have a look at that, ladies and gentlemen. You find that link down below. Hopefully the post hasn't been taken down. AI is going to be one of those things. It's either going to destroy the world or it's going to take us into a whole new realm we've never seen before for the better, right? It's going to go one of two ways. But stay tuned. We've got some songs later, by the way, or a song later, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that is guaranteed to keep you up at night. If this is the state of the political alternative that we've got, there's going to be far less in terms of good vibes than what we got at the moment. So take this moment, enjoy it. In fact, because we've got such a depressing thing coming up later on in the show, I'm going to flash over. I'm going to play this a little bit more so we can have a couple more good vibes before we move on. Thank you very much, Ange.
How many homes can Rayner buy? Laughing at you with the tax they slide. How many homes, I'll name them all, big and dancing in the Commons Hall. Tax man crying, Rayner smiling, one rule for me.
Well, Rayner not smiling so much anymore. One rule for me, one rule for you, indeed. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is an important development as well. So I mentioned before at the start of this show that there's been some interesting developments, and we talked about last time that some of the Epstein victims were at Washington, and with Thomas Massey support, it seemed, or it might have been a different event that was. I know there's been a bit of thing over that. With the Epstein victims saying that they were going to come up with their own list, basically. Something which I didn't really anticipate at the time, or didn't really see until some of the conservative commentators had said at the time, was that you know, why didn't they just say the names there and then? Obviously, the potential for that is that they could get their asses sued if there's people in there that haven't been named yet or whatever, for whatever reason. Obviously, a lot of people simply can't take that risk. So I hope, whether it's, you know, some people have been saying people like Thomas Massey are just picking this up now as a political issue to get at Trump, right? Because he's fumbled it so much. But at the end of the day, why the fuck did they fumble it so much, right? You know, the complicity of Pam Bondi and potentially even Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Point being, ladies and gentlemen, with regards to this now, an OMG undercover journalist has caught on camera, right, an admission, an interesting admission indeed, from somebody by the name of Joseph Schnitt, who is acting deputy chief at the Office of Enforcement Operations at America's Department of Justice. And he's been on there saying, been on the record saying that A, the Epstein files do indeed exist. B, that the DOJ will likely redact every Republican that's on the list and leave all the liberal Democrat candidates on the list to use as a political tool. And then even C, potentially they are trying to give benefits to Ghislaine Maxwell, or Ghislaine Maxwell, I'm not really sure how you say it because I've seen people say it different ways, by moving her to a minimum security prison in violation of what usually happens to convicted sex offenders. Normally that's barred from them. So it seems as though they're trying to give her some benefits of some kind in order to get her to keep her mouth shut, it seems. The DOJ has been back at James O'Keefe with a statement, but then, as you see, tried to say that he, you know, from Joseph Schnitt in particular, saying that he basically didn't say what he said, never gave his role out. But James has been quite clear and literally highlights on there that he says what his role is. He says, you know, what he's involved in and that kind of stuff. This is very, very interesting. And we're also going to go over an interesting video as well in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, of someone explaining that the missing minute fiasco was far bigger than what we thought it was. And it could definitely be hiding a lot and potentially could confirm a lot of the suspicions that people have, right? Here is part of that video. This is in a couple of parts, so we'll go through this step by step, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the first part of the video from OMG Media.
Those files do exist.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of pages of files. They'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those files, leave all the liberal Democratic people in those files.
I think visited that Maxwell person.
Yeah.
And also about
Got transferred to a minimum security prison too recently, which is against BOP policy because she's a convicted sex offender. They're offering her something to keep the mouth shut.
That was the acting deputy chief of the Office of Enforcement Operations, Joseph Schnitt, telling a stranger about the FBI and DOJ's handling of the Epstein files. Schnitt, who works at a high level inside the Department of Justice, goes on to comment on the inconsistent statements, special treatment of Ghislaine Maxwell, and the blatant backtracking on promises of transparency.
And what do you do for work?
Or for the Department of Justice.
Okay.
And they're like 23. I'm an analyst. I'll be acting deputy chief of our office for a few months starting next week. I work closely with like all the federal law enforcement agencies and the U.S. attorney's offices, the prosecutors and stuff. The thing is, it's interesting because I do deal with so many of the agencies, like the Bureau of Prisons, the Marshal Service, the FBI, the U.S. attorney's offices.
Recently, the FBI...
So, before we go with that, ladies and gentlemen, so you can see that he clearly outlined who he is and what he does, who he works with, etc., etc. So this is a statement from the DOJ posted this, the U.S. Department of Justice posted this on X, right? And for 6.3 million views, it is really not being received very well, seemingly. It's only got about 4,000 likes. It's got about 1.4 thousand comments, and combining those with reposts and quotes, which from at least from what I've seen don't exactly seem to be the most positive. You know what I mean? People are not buying so much the narrative anymore, the establishment narrative. But according to Joseph Schnitt, because this is his statement, it's coming from acting director Pollock, but it's signed by him, but signed by Schnitt. I met a woman named Skylar on Hinge, a dating app, in July 2025. Her profile is no longer findable. We had 2 dates, August 4th and August 16th. She claimed to be an au pair in Georgetown. She gave no clues that she was a reporter or recording our dates. You know, that kind of gave the game away, wouldn't it? Had I a clue, the first date would have been ended immediately and there never would have been a second one. Yeah, that's why, ladies and gentlemen, these undercover reporting is so effective, because you catch them in scenarios where they wouldn't be saying what they usually say. That's why the O'Keefe media team is so effective, seemingly, and why it seems at the moment they're trying to wage so much lawfare against the undercover reporters, because they don't like this stuff coming out. He was very effective, for example, in exposing that one of Prince Andrew's confidants, or somebody that was close to Prince Andrew, saying that he was on camera saying that Prince Andrew was doing horrible things to kids, right? Or saying horrible things to young girls, right? He was on camera saying that he did it. You wouldn't know that because this guy's in a situation where he feels safe, feels able to open up with people that he feels are not going to say anything because maybe they're all on it together. Who knows? I have no idea who else was in this meeting, by the way. But again, that's why this is so important. You catch them in a scenario where they have no reason to lie. They have no reason to lie, seemingly. Again, a bit weird for you to be giving all this stuff out on a first and second date, though, saying that they're going to do all these things with the Epstein files, and the Epstein files do exist on a first and second date. You know, but anyway, it shows that the people in the government, you know, humans, we're not infallible. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, you shouldn't necessarily be that really scared of the state, even if you look at all the stuff we just went over with Angela Rayner and all the other guys, right? You have no reason to fear these people with their own. These guys are not overlords in how competent they are and stuff like that. They're propped up by a system that is effective, right? They're propped up by a system that is effective and a system that is ruthless, but these guys are just as incompetent as anyone else. So don't let yourself get into the thought process of thinking that these guys are like supremely smart or anything like that. For the most part, you might get a few geniuses here and there, right? Yeah, and usually those people then, when their morals kick in, they end up becoming whistleblowers and stuff like that. Not always, but usually. My profile indicated that I did government work, but I did not specify for which agency. I never discussed what I do at the DOJ. The comments I made were my own personal comments on what I've learned in the media and not from anything I've done at or learned via work. I have no knowledge of the circumstances surrounding Miss Maxwell other than what is reported in the news. I also never divulged anything about what I do at work. I recall that she asked if I had any knowledge about Maxwell, and I specifically said I only know what's been reported in the media. Now we've got more footage to go through, ladies and gentlemen. Just remember, though, this guy said, where is it to, that it's against BOP policy. She got transferred to a minimum security prison, which is against BOP policy because she's a convicted sex offender. He said that he's been there at the Department of Justice for 23 years, right? As an analyst, he says that he's an analyst and he works closely as an active deputy chief for our office a few months starting next week. So he's going to be the acting deputy chief, and he works closely with all the federal law enforcement agencies and the U.S. attorney's offices, the prosecutors, and stuff like that. I do so many of the agencies like the Bureau of Prisons, the Marshal Service, the FBI, the U.S. attorney's offices. He's outright open about it. So we can already see that this person, this is trying to cover for his own back, right? Because he's been snooped. He's been caught, basically. But it does not end there, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into elaborating on more of what Mr. Schnitt said.
For promising transparency, then refusing to release footage and unredacted documents, going directly against the public's expectations and the promises made by Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel. In a DOJ press release, Attorney General Pam Bondi stated, quote, "This Department of Justice is following through on President Trump's commitment to transparency and lifting the veil on the disgusting actions of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators," unquote, and also claimed they were shedding light on Epstein's extensive network, only to later claim that Epstein was acting alone, and that the only video evidence they had was of Epstein's personal child porn collection.
Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were.
In the same press.
Again, so highlighting a lot of the lies on the part of the establishment there, for example, which is only going to get worse when we hear what Mr. Schnitt had to say about what they plan to do with said Epstein files. skip to that in a moment. But again, there's so many contradictions. Just shows that the people who had suspicions about how the government were going to handle this were completely right. And that makes you think, what the hell is going on? Why won't they be, not necessarily even saying open and transparent about everything, but the names? Because who are they going to implicate? So who are the government protecting, right? And then why? And then why? And is the narrative around Jeffrey Epstein with regards to who the government says he actually is, that he's just this creep who was good with cameras or whatever, this disgusting child predator creep, was he actually who he said he was, or was he working on behalf of other agencies? Again, nobody ever asked. This biggest thing with Bondi, nobody ever asked to see the videos of the atrocious acts that happened. Nobody ever asked to see photos or anything like that. Nobody ever asked to see any of this stuff of the acts taking place. People want to know who was there. People want to know who was there and who was in the videos doing the horrible things to young girls. That's what people know. They just want names. It's the fact that you guys aren't coming out with names that's ruining your credibility. And rightfully so. And rightfully so. So you're skipping forward more of the footage. He goes through in the video about how Kash Patel saying one thing on Fox News and then saying another thing when he went on the Joe Rogan Experience. Right. Here's the next bit of Schnitt, however, talking about the internal conflict at the DOJ, and again making us full of confidence about the state of the officials being responsible for justice in our supposedly free and morally upright countries.
Internally, there's a lot of, even within the administration, there's internal conflict.
Okay.
Like the head of FBI really wants it. Second in command at FBI has been causing problems because he's like, no, these have to be released.
Yeah. So the FBI wants them out.
Yep, the top two guys gotta do it. Yeah.
And Bonnie does it.
I don't know what that is. Bonnie wants whatever child.
Why is there such...
So, a lot of information there in very few brief sentences, ladies and gentlemen. So he said there, one thing that I want to know, and he says that this is a bit weird. The FBI, the head of the FBI, so that would be Kash Patel, wants to, and the second in command at the FBI, Bongino, has been causing problems because he also wants to. Now, that seems a little bit thing to me because of how Kash Patel has changed and the seemingly under duress interview that Bongino gave when he said that, look, I've seen the files, Epstein killed himself, and went back on everything that he'd been saying on his podcast for years, right? Now, he's the one seeming to be pushing for the Epstein files to be released. And the only way I can see him causing problems is if he's running up against Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, or maybe it's him and Kash Patel running up against Pam Bondi, right? And if Trump potentially is covering for whether it be foreign governments or covering for people within his own administration, right? And covering for what he may see as the state of the entire government, the governance of the United States and the world as a whole, right? Because this has the potential to bring down many governments, royal families even, right? So is he seeing that he's doing things protecting those people, and that's why he's objecting to it? And then Bondi's just following his lead because, as he said, she's just a yes man, yes person, yes lady, whatever. So that's what I'm seeing. It again just speaks to the whole thing where we said the web of corruption. And it just seemed that it's not just in the UK government, for example, with the exit of Angela Rayner and others that have been doing the exact opposite of what they're supposed to do. We are wondering now, is have the dominoes begun falling, have the chips begun coming down on all of these people to the point where they can't keep this under wraps anymore? People can't keep, as they say, loose lips sink ships, as they say, loose lips sink ships. But it does seem as though there's a lot of forces behind the scenes that don't want these things to be released, obviously, right? But again, just it does seem that people were right, seemingly, to have little faith in the establishment and in the government, seemingly. But I suppose, again, it's only through the work of people like James O'Keefe that are truly holding their feet to the fire, holding the government's feet to the fire, right? That's actually bringing about the change that people want. Because it seems, though, that if he's to be believed here, right, where he's saying if we'll get the Epstein files at all, that they plan to use it as a political tool. If what Joseph Schmidt is saying here, Joseph Schnitt, sorry, is saying is correct, they plan, rather sadly, to use the Epstein victims and the whole case or whatever as a political tool to get at their political opponents and leave potentially disgusting child predators and child rapists on their own side to go scot-free purely for the political benefits.
Do you think like the stuff with Epstein will actually get released or not at all?
If it does, it'll be heavily redacted, and his name won't be in it.
But those files do exist.
There's files.
Yeah.
For sure. There's thousands and thousands of pages of files. But again, if they're released in any way, it's going to be very redacted. They'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those files, leave all the liberal Democratic people in those files, and have a very slanted version of it come out where it's like, look at what these are, without releasing any of their bad behavior.
This is James O'Keefe.
So that will not make people happy, because ultimately what people care about is justice. And no matter what political allegiance the people may be beholden to or whatever, they want to know that justice has been done. That's what they want to know. They want to know that justice has been done. And that seems as though it's not going to be done. All right. And it's really, really sad, because we've seen what happens when justice is deprived of things like the grooming gangs in the UK, for example, and people have used that as a political football to no end. Nigel Farage and Reform used it as a political football, despite seeming that they were going to do nothing about it right from the get-go, and knowing they were going to do nothing about it, using the victims and their cases as a political football to gain political clout by saying that he was going to fund a private inquiry and never did so, right? And that when Rupert Lowe launched his inquiry, that he got support from other members of the House, but yet Nigel Farage and all of the Reform guys are conveniently absent from supporting somebody who they may not get along with, right? Somebody who dare defend the dear leader's ego, right? Yet he was the one that went on to actually fund it, and actually seems to be doing some good work with trying to get justice for the victims now. As we know, they've been doing seemingly a lot of good work. The list of 85 constituencies that were exposed as having covered up systematic child abuse, right? Been complicit in it. But this is the thing where it does seem now, ladies and gentlemen, in order to, again, further politicize this and further to stop things from being negatively skewed onto them, despite the fact that might be what needs to happen in order for justice to happen. We don't care at this point if it ends up collapsing fucking political systems. A lot of us want our political systems to collapse because we don't like the current political system that we're in. Don't like living in a world where governments cover for each other despite doing heinous crimes against young girls. Right, and then the powerful get to go away with it and get away with it. The rich and powerful get to get away with it. But then, if you were to do even something remotely close to that, if you were to even criticize a leader, criticize a president, or criticize a prime minister, or criticize anything, try and highlight the truth about systematic grooming gangs, for example, you end up going to prison simply because of your socioeconomic status. A lot of the time, the fact that you can't defend yourself in the same way, and you can't get off scot-free with these things. No, a lot of us are sick and tired for it, because then the same people that get off scot-free with these heinous crimes will say that, oh yeah, well, all of us are, nobody is above the law and stuff like that. No, go fuck yourselves. That's not the case whatsoever. Says a lot then when they apparently go to visit Ghislaine Maxwell and are now moving her to a minimum security prison in violation of BOP policy, seemingly to give her these benefits and keep her quiet. It's the last part of the video now, ladies and gentlemen. This is very interesting indeed.
They visited that Maxwell person?
Yeah.
And also about?
Got transferred to a minimum security prison too recently, which is against BOP policy because she's a convicted sex offender, and they're not supposed to get minimum security prisons, which is an interesting detail because she's getting a benefit, which means they're offering her something to keep it on shut.
The difference between a low security prison and a minimum security prison is that minimum security prisons are designed for non-violent offenders with short sentences. They often have no perimeter fencing, and inmates are housed in dormitory-style rooms. We looked into the Bureau of Prisons policies, and Schnitt's claim is in fact correct. Convicted sex offenders are historically ineligible for minimum security facilities.
So just to read you it on screen, ladies and gentlemen, I'll bring it back up on the full screen in a moment. This where it says, so this is from the U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Prisons, change notice, inmate security designation and custody classification. So a sex offender, a male or female inmate whose behavior in the current term of confinement or prior history includes one or more of the following elements will be housed in at least a low security level institution. So basically say minimum security, which is what you saw on the other side. So when you saw these dormitory rooms, as you can see here, he lays them out really well. The minimum security here on the right, much more like a university dormitory, not quite as, luxurious, if you will, in many instances, but just a very small room, but a bed, a sink, some amenities and stuff like that. You can even have decorations on the wall. A low security is a prison bunk with a single desk, bars on the windows, and usually no perimeter fencing in the minimum security versus low security, you do in fact have a perimeter fence. So again, breaking policy to give a convicted sex offender, which bear in mind again, sex offending or sex trafficking to no one, let's bear that in mind, sex trafficking to no one. So there are no clients or whatever, as the DOJ have claimed. Well, surely she should be free, because how can she sex traffic if there's nobody to sex traffic to, right? But again, this is just where corruption seems to have no end, ladies and gentlemen. So bring it forward again now. Bring it forward
Are
again.
historically ineligible for minimum security facilities. Schnitt is also very credible by virtue of where he works inside the Department of Justice. This raises significant questions about why Ghislaine Maxwell was provided such special treatment at a time where the DOJ and the FBI are under heavy scrutiny for their handling of the Epstein files. The DOJ and FBI have continually promised transparency to the country. Why was the case's most significant witness transferred to a more comfortable prison life, all while Epstein's victims were still not receiving the justice they deserve? Why does it take a random girl in Washington, D.C. for someone like Joseph Schnitt to open up? Why are top DOJ officials spilling all these secrets in restaurants, while the American people are not necessarily afforded the same transparency that they're promised? It doesn't.
Yep. It doesn't make any sense, indeed. But again, you can't have admittedly, you can't have a government that is 100% transparent, because obviously they had to keep certain things secret because they're dealing on a geopolitical stage, right? Foreign governments are watching everything that a government does. If they say something in the media, the foreign government is going to be all over it as potential information, right? They have to keep things under wraps for national security and stuff like that. Admittedly, yes. But you have to do that. The only way you can give them the benefit of the doubt on that is if you understand that they're morally upright and good people that have your interests at heart with the weight of the position that they're in. And we're seeing that with many governments, many government officials across the world, that not only are they incompetent, but in many instances they've turned evil and actually turned against their people. And that's why so many people are in many ways in open rebellion, seemingly at the moment against the state. Not in many ways violent yet, but it could be potentially in the future. Obviously, we did cover that there was in fact a violent outbreak that broke out between the National Socialist Network and Antifa in Australia. Can we hope that isn't the side of things to come? Because ultimately, the division between the two sides, division between people in the communities, only benefits the people that seek to control, right? United we stand, divided we fall, right? That's the way it is. But ultimately, if we are divided between like left and right, it's only going to benefit seemingly the people who are in current control of our politicians, because the only way we can ensure that we don't change the system, at least with the democratic means that we still currently have, which are rapidly being eroded, is by remaining divided. And that's why they're trying to divide us on all different lines, right? The feminism was the most destructive thing in this instance because it divided the bedrock institution of society, that being the family, right? But again, people are divided along what lines of oppression they have through the trans and gender ideology. People are divided between, as I said, men and women, the class lines, right? The bourgeoisie and proletariat still manifesting, race lines, all of these things, right? And that's ultimately what the government wants, because if we are divided against each other, it's all the more easy for us to be controlled. But this is why the missing minute of footage with regards to Epstein, why all of the lies are so important. This video breaks it down really well, in my opinion, which I'm going to play for you now. And it actually corrects a mistake that I got wrong before, because I thought the door 46 in the footage that was, released by the DOJ that was edited, right? There's so many things around that. The fact they gave it to like a journalist of like one of the publications to edit and then splice together or whatever. In fact, they were so bad, right? There was a frame change. There was all manner of different things. But I actually thought the door that was in question was door 46, and that was the door to Epstein's cell. That wasn't actually right, as this video will correct in a moment. And it will also explain why that missing minute was not only so important, but the fact that something could have gone on in that time based on guard movements and stuff like that, based on the fact that the perspective from the camera seems to be done deliberately. I can't imagine this is the only camera that's located within that. And there's going to be a camera that's directly in line of sight of the thing that's most important that was going on. You would have seen a slight jump cut there, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a video explaining why that missing minute was so important. I am just going to adjust the audio because the audio was clipping. Right, video coming on screen now, ladies and gentlemen.
So let me just get this straight. So we have a guard emerge from the shadows, disappear in the direction of Epstein's cell.
Epstein's door is way back over here in the corner. You can't see it from this footage angle.
60 seconds later, he returns and walks not to check on any other cells, not to make rounds. He walks up the stairs and exits. And that's the footage that was missing, according to officials.
There's just no way that you could have run an op and had people go into that cell and not have any video of it.
This is physically possible to reach his cell and not be picked up on camera. Why would so many people so blatantly lie?
There's just no access points into places like this in the detention center he was in. If they had gotten into the cell, you would see it.
We can't see him from this camera angle, even though if we make the walls transparent, obviously we can see him. But in the raw footage, we'd have no way of knowing if somebody walked this direction.
I've never seen anything like this, and this is scary stuff.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. You wonder why there's no trust there, ladies and gentlemen. So for those of you who are listening, not watching, I'll pull it back up on screen in a moment, but let me just describe what's going on. So the camera that's showing the door of 46 that we saw before is not actually showing Epstein's cell, as I said. I think it was actually showing the entrance to the cell block. But the way the camera is, if you imagine you're looking out over the stairs, down to the left of the perspective of the camera is the stairs, right? You go down those stairs and then you go over to the right, but in that perspective, you get to a point then when you're down on the lower floor, but you walk so far, the wall that is the door to the cell block is on the upper floor actually gets in the way of the camera. So the camera's up on top of the stairs, basically, and you can only see so far in. You can only see so far into the room itself. Now, if you walk beyond that wall, where the wall would stop your vision, you can actually access a staircase that's behind that wall. And if you, again, as CoffeeZilla in this instance, made it very easy to see, if you have a look at this part of the video where, again, you might have to blow it up on your screen to watch this bit, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm going to do a terrible job of articulating it. When he makes the wall transparent, you can clearly see that's where the staircase is, and that's where the body's going. That's where the guard is coming from. Those are the stairs going up to Epstein's room, Epstein's cell. So obviously it would be very easy to go up there within the minute that we saw, rig everything, right? Do a little job, right? Rig everything, and then walk back down. And as you see, he doesn't check any other cell on the block or anything. It doesn't check any other doors. It's just Epstein's cell, seemingly. Now, obviously, could be wrong, but the fact there's been so many lies told about this, there's been so many lies. So again, just to bring it up one more time for you, ladies and gentlemen, again, because I know I've done a terrible job of describing it for those of you who are listening. CoffeeZilla stood by here. This is where the wall gets in the way. Just behind this wall here, where the door is where the cell of the entrance to the cell block where Jeffrey Epstein's located is. And if you make that wall transparent, you then see that camera footage is very, very suspect indeed. So that's why, again, it does seem that there is a cover-up going on, which we've known about time and time again. People have made allegations time and time again. But again, the story's not adding up. The story from Kash Patel, which is why, again, when James Schmidt said that there was conflict going on, it's maybe thinking that maybe Kash doesn't want us to come out for whatever reason. Maybe it's because on directives from Trump or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's why Dan Bongino, thinking back to that interview that he gave before, Dan Bongino, at least from what I can remember, seemed to be under a lot more stress. Than Kash Patel when he was saying that Epstein killed himself. I think that's because this weighs heavily more on Dan than it does on Kash, personally. I think Kash, this is just the way that I see the situation. Again, I don't know Kash. I don't have anything against him personally, but it seems like he's more okay with going along with this than Dan is. Maybe because Dan obviously made his name in the podcast scene. He had one of the largest podcasts in America. And he was very, very strong on the line that Epstein did not kill himself, that he did not believe Epstein killed himself. And I think because that's weighing on him, because either it's the effect it's going to have on his reputation, how maybe his family are going to see him differently. Maybe his family's being threatened behind the scenes. You don't know. Don't know, because the corruption goes fucking deep in these circles, right? So you don't know if his family's being threatened behind the scenes or anything like that. His personal safety's being threatened, all of these things, right? How they're going to ruin him if he decides to say anything or if he decides to stray away from the party, right? But there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, and this is seriously bad. And when they tried to come up with that footage, which you could tell was edited, they tried to make that it was raw footage. You could tell that it was edited and say that, that there's nothing to see here, basically. All the lines, but there's nothing to see here. Certainly makes it think that, no, there is actually some things to see here. You just don't want us to look at it. You just don't want us to know. And you're covering for people that have done horrible things to children. So again, this has been one of the biggest dark stains on the Trump administration that is seemingly so needless, but it makes you wonder, what else is going on? What else is going on that you need to cover for these people? I don't think, personally, still at the moment, that Trump is actually in the Epstein files in any credible capacity with doing heinous things to kids, personally. Because I think the Democrats would have used it. They would have used it in the previous election. But then there is the argument on the other side, because if they would have used it, then they would have had to have opened up and essentially fired the nukes at themselves as well. Maybe they weren't willing to take that risk, because maybe they could have thought they could get him on the other stuff. Maybe they thought they would have got him on the other stuff and they wouldn't need to use it. I do think they would have used it, right, if they had anything. But the argument is there that is credible as well. Well, because the logical next step would have been, well, hang on, what about the allegations against Clinton? What about the allegations against all the others? Right? If they'd only come out with the Trump stuff, there would have been a lot more questions and a lot more scrutiny, and it might not have gone their way purely because they would have said, well, hang on, you were just using it as a political football. Now, and God knows what would have happened. But maybe they didn't want to take that risk because they would have had to open up the can of worms on themselves. I don't know. Ultimately, the people just want to know. People like me, again, do we need radical 100% transparency, right? Because no, we don't need to see the footage and anything like that, right? Nobody wants to see that, obviously. But we want to know that justice is done for the victims. And just so we know that good has been done. Good has finally won, because good will win in the end, obviously, but finally that good has been done and people have been willing to take the risk to do it. It's truly awful. It's truly awful, because we have so much evil in the world at the moment. And this was an article I had to talk about, because this is truly disgusting. Because I've spoken before about people that have been inside the healthcare systems in the UK, Justine Winter, Victoria Rickson, for example, Lisa Peregrine, these people that have been inside and talked about the culture that's within the NHS and stuff like that, how much they're willing to cover up. And it seems that, again, the fact that the British state arrested and terrorized Michelle recently, she goes by Shell 666 on X, by the way, at Shell 666. She, after she went into hospital for a back injury after a fall, she was viciously sexually assaulted, I believe, by more than one healthcare provider when she was at her most vulnerable. And it just goes to show how evil the British state is, that they'll cover up this, they'll cover up child rape, they'll cover up all manner of things in the pursuit of their ideological bent, right? In the pursuit of their ideological aims. Another thing happened recently. This was posted 4 days ago, from BBC. A woman by the name of Valerie Neal died at Blackpool Victoria Hospital days after suffering a stroke. And this stroke patient, Valerie, was sexually assaulted and basically left to die. And the fact there was all the evidence seems to have been lost, quote unquote lost again. It just goes to show how evil our institutions have become, and we really need to do something about it. And that comes with public awareness first off, and being willing to stand on principle, and say something. A stroke patient died as a result of being sexually assaulted after she was admitted to hospital. Retired clerical assistant Valerie Neal, 75, died at Blackpool Victoria Hospital on 16th of November 2018, 4 days after suffering a stroke at home in Polton-le-Field, I'm not sure to say that, or Polton-le-Fielder, in Lancashire. While preparing Mrs. Neal's body to be moved to the mortuary, 3 healthcare assistants identified extensive and significant bleeding around the vaginal area. Forensic pathologist Dr. Alison Armour concluded Mrs. Neal died not because of a stroke, but because of a forcible sexual assault. And this is not new, ladies and gentlemen. Articles are broke. This has happened thousands of times inside of hospitals. Over 5,000, 6,000 times this has happened by some accounts in the media. This is one story, very sadly, of many. And this is tied with all manner of political initiatives that have put the worst people in these positions, because that's ultimately what diversity, equity, inclusion, all of these things are designed to do, is designed to put the worst people in the positions in the name of representation. in the name of representation, and that is inherently tied with immigration. That's inherently tied with mental health status of some people, that because of people's mental health, they shouldn't be in the positions that they're in. In fact, that's why in the last bit we're going to be going over for a little bit later on in the show, ladies and gentlemen, with Dame, what's her name again? Dame Andrea Jenkins came out to a reform conference singing a song that allegedly she had co-wrote called Insomnia. Now, if an elected representative has insomnia because they're not able to deal with the demands of their job, I don't want them in their job for a start. But again, this goes in contrast with the Rayner song that we saw before. But the point about critical evidence, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very important, because we've seen that the hospitals will cover up for these people. Hospitals cover up for these people. They'll cover up for rogue nurses. They'll cover up for these disgusting sex pests, right? These rapists. That was what happened in the case of Michelle, by the way. The leader of the hospital wouldn't want anything to do with it, blocked her. Police didn't want to do anything. They still haven't done anything. Dr. Armour said she thought the injury was inflicted at least 48 hours before death, and that it happened after Mrs. Neal's admission. The inquest at Blackpool Town Hall was told no concerns were raised either when the healthcare assistants noticed Mrs. Neal's bleeding or during her stay in hospital. Detectives went on to order a post-mortem examination as part of an ongoing investigation into allegations of mistreatment and neglect of the hospital's stroke ward. Retired Senior Investigating Officer Jill Riley said the non-reporting of Mrs. Neal's bleeding had an impact on the murder investigation which followed. The delay was significant in securing and preserving critical evidence. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, a lot of these things, a lot of evidence that's going to be available for these crimes, right, is going to be time-oriented, time-based. If you can get to these evidences before they have a chance to either disappear due to decay, or if they have a chance to, you know, if it's a liquid, it has a chance to dry, and then you can't really say when it was dropped or anything like that. It's important sometimes to get to these evidences whilst they're still able to be analysed, right, in order to get the full picture. And it seems as though there's not only cover-up that's going on, but again, you have to wonder how much of this is incompetence as well. Valerie's room would have been cleared and used by other patients. There was limited, if any, forensic opportunities. There were no CCTV opportunities in the stroke unit, and the wider hospital, because of the data, had been overrun and had been deleted, while clothing worn by Valerie at the time of death had been disposed of by hospital staff. Again, very convenient, very convenient. If I'm not mistaken, ladies and gentlemen, if something like this was to happen, normally they allow the family to come in and say, do you want to get anything? They don't normally just go and dispose of stuff like clothing, which would have DNA on it. There may be a hair that's left on there, right? Skin that had been taken, that had been skin sample that would have been left on her clothing, during the attack, right? So it's very suspicious that the hospital then would go and dispose of it. Makes you think maybe a lot of them knew what happened. Seemingly they would be, obviously, and then they chose to go and dispose it to cover for the disgusting predator that done this. Maybe because of narratives to do with, again, immigration, racism. Again, this is the thing, not always, but with how much corruption we've seen, these are the natural questions that people are going to be jumping to now, for better or for worse. Access to the unit was also considered, as the investigation established from staff that entry doors were sometimes propped open and tailgating would also occur. Tailgating is another thing that happened that was described in one of my conversations with Justine Winter as well, where a lot of these rogue nurses, because they wouldn't be able to access the medicine cabinet, they would say, oh, please, leave the door open, because obviously they're not in a position where they should be anywhere near that stuff. They shouldn't even be near the hospital. These people are like infiltrators. It's almost like invasion of the body snatchers almost. People need to understand what the hell we're dealing with here. We need to understand the morals as well of a lot of people, right, that are in these positions, because a lot of people are in these positions they really, really shouldn't be. Let me just pull something up for you, ladies and gentlemen. I wasn't going to pull this up, but this is something that really needs to be addressed as well. So, this was shared from America recently. It just goes to show the depravity on a lot of the people within these so-called healthcare institutions recently as well, because there was a video from a hospital in America. Actually, I'll see if I can find it a moment, where all the staff were fired because they'd made a video on TikTok mocking a lady who I believe had trouble controlling her bodily fluids, bodily functions, right? And they made a video mocking her, and all of them then were subsequently fired. Thank God, obviously. Let me just see if I can find it for you a sec. Right, I found the video for you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to play it on mute because there is a song that plays in the... Let me just see if I can get the... think I'm out of focus, but I also don't know. Anyway, there's a song plays in the background, but obviously I don't want it to get like copyrighted or anything like that. This is somebody swiping through some of the things that these people posted on TikTok. Before I play the video, I'm just going to put this up on screen so you can get a good look at some of the scum that we're talking about. So this is from America. This is in America in this instance. And you'll see some of the things that these quote-unquote healthcare staff had to say about some of their patients whom had trouble controlling their bodily output, should we say. So you can see, ladies and gentlemen, as I'll pull them up on screen now and go through them one by one, there's a female nurse here with 2 thumbs up saying yes, and the caption is yes, because there's a stain that's been left on one of the white sheets that they cover the, whether it's a seat or whether it's a bed with, right, if they're going in to have operations or whatever. The next one then, which will slide through, here we go. It's this one. Another nurse smiling next to it with, again, another wet patch on the paper saying, and we love them so much. You know, these gifts that you leave for us. All shapes and sizes. It's a female nurse bent over by the seat with a substantially sized stain on the white paper. Again, it says all shapes and sizes. And then the last one, ladies and gentlemen, is truly disgusting. It's a bunch of them crowded around a bed where a patient has clearly been for some kind of procedure. There's another one of these stains on the white paper or whatever. It says, make sure to leave your healthcare workers sweet gifts like these. One of them is squatting over the bed where the patient's head would have been. Another one's got their foot on the bed. These are the kinds of morally disgusting, depraved people that we have in many instances in our healthcare institutions. That might be a minority, but thankfully these people were fired. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the tip of the iceberg, you know what I mean? But this is an example of some of the stuff that we are seeing in quote-unquote healthcare institutions. Again, this is more of a personal thing where you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and understand that what you're doing is disgusting and heinous. And that you should change your ways, right? But, you know, this is what happens as well, largely, when you don't screen for either morals or you don't do, you know, character assessments because your judgment has been clouded by this need for representation, right? Quite clearly, whoever was in charge of hiring in this instance wasn't doing the best job of picking the best people for the job. And luckily, the biggest thing is, ladies and gentlemen, that, again, some element of justice has been done, that every single one of them that was in these photos, right, again, makes you think how stupid people are to post these things to social media, right? Just to show that not only how morally bankrupt some people are, but also how stupid they are, is that they have been fired. They have been fired, thankfully. So I do hope that for this lady, at least, that I don't know if anybody was caught. If you have any more information about this case with regards to Valerie Neal, anything that's happened, if anybody's been caught. But this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen, you have to watch your back next time you go in now. You have to watch your back next time you go into hospital and things like that, because people who are in there nowadays are not the people of old in many ways, I don't think. And you have to be careful whether it's rogue nurses, whether it's morally bankrupt, you know, degenerate people. Sadly, there's more of them than ever with how much we've decided that we want to cast off the shackles of traditional morality, stuff like that. And speaking of, again, horrible, reprehensive individuals in positions of care and positions of authority and stuff like that, a Labour council leader has since resigned also after calling rape gang victims white trash. So that stuff that was flying before between councillors and police and all that stuff, not going to fly anymore. Not going to fly anymore. Daisy Blackmore was the first person to post this on X because she actually had correspondence with the Labour councillor in question. Dennis Jones, the leader of Peterborough Council, made the comments in late night exchanges with a younger councillor, Daisy Blackmore, and he labelled the child rape gang victims in Rotherham as white trash. So I will see if I can pull up the screenshot in a moment for you, ladies and gentlemen. Again, everything to do with this is completely politicised, as you can imagine. He says, after Daisy raised concerns about immigration and women's safety, again, you can't have anybody that's threatening the narrative of multiculturalism and diversity as our strength nowadays. Jones lashed out, "Oh, so white British cops fucking pour white trash in Rotherham is okay, is it? Get a fucking grip, Daisy." He went on to accuse her of chasing quote-unquote populist votes and attention, adding, "I wish you no luck at all." This is the epitome of how feminism absolutely ruins men with the way that they talk about these things. And this is the screenshot in question, ladies and gentlemen. So this is directly from the WhatsApp chat. And this is his message. The name isn't labeled on there in the Express article, which I've got here, but I can attest from what I've seen personally on WhatsApp that this is from him himself. It says, "Oh, so white British cops fucking pour white trash in Rotherham is okay, is it? Get a fucking grip, Daisy. You are aiming for populist votes and attention. Forgive me, but you are bright enough to know what you are doing, and politically, I wish you no luck at all. Best you know what you are but you know what you are setting out to do." Not going to get away with this shit nowadays. Not going to get away with this shit nowadays. I don't think resignation is in many ways enough. It'd be, I'd just say, it'd be a shame if there was to be some kind of, civilian justice, if you will. But he did indeed resign. So luckily now, one of the people that had this outlook, which is not uncommon. This is not uncommon. This is the way the police saw these young girls, right? This is obviously the way that the rape gang perpetrators themselves saw these young girls, and just tells you a lot about how this is how your elected representatives see your children. This is how they see your children. And again, you have to take this into account whenever you need to go to your elected representative with a problem now, whenever you have any grievance or anything like that, just bear in mind with how exactly they see you, the depths of how far their hatred for you, if you are a native British person, right? If you're one of these, again, poor white girls from Rotherham, right? This is how your elected representatives see you. And when you see that, and when you understand that, you understand very easily how the rape gang atrocities were able to be perpetuated for so long. It's clear as day. Because they never wanted to do anything about it. If they wanted to do something about it, they could have done it. They could have had the army in to evict all the communities and done that way back in the fucking 70s and 80s, right? When these things were going on in there, these things were ramping up back then. In the 50s, you had cases, right? In the 50s, you had cases before any of the other generations of mass migration, anything like that, before Windrush, before any of this, you had cases of this going on. So we could have got rid of those people all the way back then and maybe would have saved us a hell of a big headache right now, right? People didn't want to do anything then. They don't want to do anything now. Ultimately, their action is going to have to be forced. Public backlash is probably the biggest thing that we have. And that's what caused Mr. Dennis, what was his name? Dennis Jones to resign. Good riddance to him. Good riddance to him. He should be given some of the justice that, what was his name? The other elected representative that punched the shit out of one of his constituents. Mike Amesbury. Maybe even be given some of the Mike Amesbury justice that he administered to one of his constituents. It'd be a big shame, wouldn't it? Be a big shame. I think after this, there's going to be a Nuremberg 2.0 that's coming. That has to be for all the Fabians, for all the disgusting traitors, right? All the people like Dennis, right? There's going to be a Nuremberg 2.0 that's coming. So I'm kind of worried about the future a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a reckoning for the crimes against the British people for generations, nearly getting up to 75 years or more even. Just, there's no words. There's no words. And there's no words to describe this last part either, ladies and gentlemen. This just made me, me about my views on like women in politics and stuff like that. Women in these positions. And we spoke about Dame Andrea Jenkins before because I was disgusted at some of the things that was being said to her by, the foreign Muslim community, I think it was, where they're saying I hope your son gets molested by a refugee and raped. I hope you suffer prolapse from being raped and all of this stuff, right? All of the stuff that was said. I'd done a clip of it on YouTube a couple of months ago, I think it was, from one of the podcasts where I talk about this truly disgusting stuff. Can't ever condone it, saying that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that I come out and support her and support reform or anything like that. And certainly when they come out and do this shit, when they turn reform, which is supposedly meant to be our best anti-establishment vehicle, right? Best anti-establishment vehicle when they've turned politics in the UK at a more, what could not be a worse time. The UK is a tinderbox waiting for one match. You know the stereophonic song where it says it takes one match to light up 1,000 trees? Only takes one match to burn 1,000 trees? That is the state of the UK at the moment. The UK is primed for a political wildfire unlike we have ever seen, unlike anything we've ever seen, right? And you have Reform, which is supposedly our based anti-establishment alternative, coming out and selling fucking football shirts at £100 a pop if you want a signed one with Farage's name on the back of it, turning UK politics at the most divisive, at the most terrifying time into a fucking pantomime show, showing that they know better than the establishment with the way that they treated Rupert Lowe, which again, they uppers, not just Nigel Farage, but Chief Whip, quote unquote, Lee Anderson was in on it as well, right? Everyone was in on it. The fact they've seemingly sold out to the establishment, they've sold out to a Mohammedan, seemingly. But not only that, you have Dame Andrea Jenkins then coming out and turning it into a fucking true pantomime by coming out at a Reform conference singing a song called Insomnia and wearing a sparkly blue jumpsuit. Apparently saying, is this god-awful Labour government giving you sleepless nights and insomnia too? Here is this absolute travesty, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm an insomniac. I'm an insomniac. Staring at the ceiling. Waiting for my thoughts to switch off. Yes, I'm an insomniac. I'm an insomniac. And all I can hear is the sound of that.
Right, not gonna lie, first off, and I don't like to disparage people for their creative efforts and stuff like that, being somebody who does creative things anyway. You know, you can argue that a podcast and presenting this in this way is a creative venture, right? I'm not particularly hot on the song anyway. But the biggest thing is, ladies and gentlemen, if she's an insomniac and if all of this stuff is getting to her where it's giving her sleepless nights and she can't manage the stress of it, maybe not the best person for the job. Just saying that. Not only that, what gives me personally even more insomnia is that we have this current state of government that we have, and this is supposedly our best alternative. That gives me far more sleepless nights than the fucking stuff with the Labour government at the moment, because at least with the Labour government, it was expected. At least with the Labour government, after the betrayal of the Conservatives and knowing that the Labour government was just going to be a disgusting communist extension of that, and it was going to come faster and harder without lube, was the response that was going to come with the shafting of the British people. We expected it. I don't think many of us quite expected it to go as deep as it has, mind you, and they were going to be harbouring actual terrorists like Axel Rudikamana and people like that, and they were going to be, you know, sacrificing young girls to the extent that they have, and they were going to be lying as much as they have, and the whole Angela Rayner and homeless minister and all of this situation. You know, the depths of things truly some of it somehow still surprised us, but at least we could expect it. Reform at the last election had the population in the palm of their fucking hand with the way that they played things, and now they've lost everything. Elon Musk has come out against them, obviously, come out against Farage, saying he's weak and he's not going to do what is required, which is absolutely true. Absolutely true. There's a lot when you have people like, what's her name? Alex something, the Talk TV person, came out and simping for Farage and trying to talk at Elon as if she's any kind of authority on the matter, right? Obviously, she has a few scandals herself, but again, that's not uncommon in politics nowadays, and in fact, that's not uncommon for any of us in the country, right? With all the things we're not proud of. But again, this is the alternative. You're telling me that we have one of the most totalitarian, like something straight out of, again, trying to emulate China, trying to force digital ID on us, all of these things, right? We are in the midst of a great oppression in terms of our civil liberties, in terms of our rights to freedom of speech and all of these things, right? You know, our women and girls and all of us being put in danger, and we are being told that we can't do anything about it. The police chief in Canada recently came out and said that if something was to happen, if you were to get a home invader, it's probably just best you were to comply, because if you do anything in your defense, you'll get arrested. She said, look, you can call the police, but the best thing you can probably do is comply. Gad Saad had a great response to that, saying like, oh yeah, if somebody breaks in to rape you if you're a woman, the police chief is basically telling you to observe a receptive position, you know, for what's about to happen. This is the state where we are at the moment, and our best quote-unquote alternative, our based, again, I know Nigel Farage doesn't say that he's a populist, our quote-unquote best alternative, our anti-establishment, true countercultural vehicle is a woman singing about being an insomniac. And not to mention seemingly doing a very poor job of lip syncing with the backing track at certain points. That's the best we can do. This is our, again, anti-establishment vehicle. You've got to be kidding me. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, is that right now, when we're going through such hard times that we are, we need strong people, namely strong men. Strong men that are going to be able to do what is required. So maybe it might just be worth it if these people are so kept up at night by what's going on and they can't get some sleep or whatever, maybe they should step aside and let people that are willing to do what they need to do it, and just simply stay the hell out of the way. Maybe then if they're not in the positions of authority that they are, and with so much of our civilization riding on their shoulders, if they didn't have that responsibility, maybe this song would go down a lot better. Maybe I wouldn't be as worried. Maybe I wouldn't be as angry. Maybe I wouldn't be as disparaging on it if it was just a nice, song about how much the Labour government is keeping you up at night. But you're in a position to actually affect and do things about it here. We aren't. In many instances, we have to rely on you to be our voice. So if this is affecting you in this way, maybe you should think about stepping aside and letting somebody else that's more equipped to do it. That's my thoughts on it. Anyway, and I'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it as much as it can be enjoyed. Hope you find it useful more than anything. Have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. I will see you again next time, provided I haven't been picked up by the state of the glorious Socialist Republic of Wales, thought police. We shall see. Anyway, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Godspeed.